how do you see the situation in Israel? We know that Ben Gvir is not happy with the situation. He wants to leave the government, and he's trying to convince Smotrich to leave the government. But so far, we've learned that Smotrich is gonna stay with the government, and Ben Gvir gonna leave the government. And how do you see the situation of Netanyahu there?
Well, as far as Smotrich staying or going, I think he's probably going to go. His initial reaction was not strongly against, but then within a day or two, he was very as outspoken as Ben Gvir. This may very well bring down the Netanyahu government, at least unless some other members who have not been part of the coalition step up to join. This is a reminder that there's not unity of thought and purpose in Israel. They're still pretty divided, at least on some issues. As far as killing Palestinians, getting rid of the Palestinians, I think the Israelis almost across the board are united on that. And that's the problem. There is no recognition by the Zionists of the Palestinians having a right to exist. Whether the Palestinians are Christian or Muslim, it does not matter. Even though the Palestinians have inhabited that area, long before the current Jewish population that's shown up was there. And, people don't like to hear that, but, that's the fact. So I don't think this deal is going to stick at all. They're already talking about, okay, after phase one, after we get some of the hostages released, and we're going to go back on the offensive. That's where it gets interesting because, Israel talks tough and insists that they got the best military in the Middle East and in the world, perhaps. Well, but they've been fighting and trying to destroy Hamas for going on 15 months now. And despite Israel having every military advantage, they've been unable to destroy Hamas. If anything, Hamas has grown stronger, attracted more recruits, become more popular. And Israel, by contrast, has become more isolated. So the hopes of this ceasefire turning into something more enduring hinges in part on what the Saudis do, and the Jordanians, the Emiratis from the United Arab Emirates. If they hold firm to their position that there's not going to be any normalization of relationships with Israel or the United States, for that matter, unless the rights of the Palestinian people are addressed and a Palestinian state is created. If they hold true to that, then I think that's going to have some influence over Donald Trump, because Trump is not a committed Zionist. Trump is a committed Trumpian. He's going to do what's going to solidify his reputation and legacy. And he's not going to sacrifice his reputation for Benjamin Netanyahu or anyone else in Israel, for that matter. So, I think he's pretty, let's call him pragmatic or dogmatic on that particular point. So this, we'll see how the hostage release proceeds. There is, we have to acknowledge that here in the United States, then particularly this group that Trump has appointed, Pete Hegseth to nominated for Secretary of Defense, Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, Michael Waltz as National Security Advisor. These guys are all what I call Christian Zionists. Boy, they are just hard over. Oh, we got to support Israel no matter what, and Israel does nothing wrong, and Israel's good, Palestinian bad. So, that attitude's not going away anytime soon here in the United States either. And what's shocking, and, the rest of the world should understand this, is, after 14 months of slaughtering women and children in Gaza, Israel's, standing at least among a significant portion of the American public hasn't deteriorated at all. Now, there is a generational problem cropping up because a lot of the people who are 30 years of age and younger, between 18 and 30, they are increasingly on the side of the Palestinians, not the Israelis. So it is, the prospects for the enduring peace out of this, very low.
It's so amazing that Joe Biden, in his latest interview, he was talking about when this conflict started in the aftermath of October 7th. Here is what he said, Larry, in terms of they knew what they were going to do in Gaza. Here is what he said, Larry. And he tries to legitimize, by the way, what Israel did with what has happened in 1945.
I went to Israel immediately after their attack by Hamas, 8 days later, whatever it was. And I told them we were going to help. And I said, but Bibi, I said, you can't be carpet bombing these communities. And he said to me, well, you did it. You carpet bomb, not his exact words, but you carpet bomb Berlin. You dropped a nuclear weapon. You killed thousands of innocent people because you had to in order to win a war. I said, but that's why we came up with the UN. New deals by which what we would do relative to civilians and military.
So he was comparing 21st century war tactics, battle tactics, with World War II.
Well, what he was really doing is he was going after me for saying you can't indiscriminately bomb civilian areas, even if the bad guys are there. Even if the bad guys are there, you can't take out 2, 10, 12, 1,500 people, innocent people, in order to get the one bad guy. And he made the legitimate argument. His perspective said, look, these are the guys that kill my people. These are the guys that are all over in these tunnels. Nobody had any idea the miles of tunnels are down there. It's amazing what they built. And they're sometimes 200 feet under the ground. Well, the way to get to them is take out the places where they were under which they got to the tunnels. And so that's the first time I had the discussion about bombing civilian areas was when I went over after the 9/11, after the massacre that occurred.
So on that first trip, 10, 11 days after October 7th, you already raised the issues of how to get to a ceasefire.
Well, not a ceasefire, how to prevent innocent death.
Yes.
And then I pushed really, really hard for more humanitarian aid to go in.
It was a legitimate argument, as he mentioned, the way that Netanyahu was dealing with him.
Well, what do you mean by legitimate?
Joe Biden is doing
this is called, you're justifying criminal activity. The United States was totally unjustified in its bombing of civilian areas throughout Germany and Japan, destroying the civilian population. I mean, but we excused it. I mean, look, the reality when you stack up history, the United States pillaging, murdering of native Indian tribes here in the United States as part of its creation, as our creation as a nation, it stands as a stain on America. We massacred Indian civilians. And we always presented the Indians as, sometimes as the bad guys, apart from the Thanksgiving when, they saved the Pilgrims, as the story goes. But, how dare they attack settlers? Well, we were invaders. So, when people react to an invasion or react to oppression, it depends on who gets to tell the story. That whether it's justified or not, legitimate or not. The Netanyahu and his Zionist cronies, they believe in what I call the mythology of the Old Testament, the Torah, that they are uniquely selected by God, even though when you get into the language of the Torah, God's name, there's Elohim, there's Yahweh, it's actually sort of a confused picture, but they've convinced themselves and convinced a lot of Christians that, this supreme being has given them exclusive rights to this territory, and not only that, told them that they can kill anybody that gets in their way. And it's okay because God says, hey. Well, if you believe that, then it's easy to, fall into this whole narrative. I don't believe it. I think it's one of the biggest lies of history, in my view. And it's a scam. And it's a scam from this standpoint that the writing of the Old Testament was done by Jews who were in exile. They were in what used to be, what we now know as Iran, but was a Babylonian empire. That's where they wrote this. They wrote about out of oral tradition. And they said, well, hey, God, this is from God. Trust me. Once, human beings have a real gullibility in getting told a story about some sort of divine external intervention, but once they latch onto it, boy, they don't let go of it, and it becomes a premise for a lot of death and destruction. You see it. We see it in Judaism. We've seen it in Christianity. We've seen it in Islam. So it's not one particular religion that has a monopoly on this. So as long as we understand that Israel's intent with respect to the Palestinian people is to exterminate them, they have no right to live there. As long as we understand that, then we've got to say, okay, we've at least identified what the problem is. Are we willing to accept that? Now, up to this point, Netanyahu has realized that he's got Joe Biden in his hip pocket. Joe Biden's bought and paid for. Biden, when he was a member of the Senate, he was the largest recipient of funds from Jewish groups, like American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC. So, he could have brought this to an end, 12, 14 months ago. All you had to do is tell Bibi, if you drop one more bomb on a hospital, on a mosque, on a school, you're done. We're cutting you off. There will be no more bombs from America. But what did Biden do? He sent him more bombs. So this is, but what we've also learned is despite sending him all those bombs, the Palestinians are still standing. They're still intact.
You remember we talked about the two conflicts that Donald Trump had to deal with before 2024 presidential election. We were talking about it. You said the most difficult one is this one, is in the Middle East. And here Donald Trump comes even before taking office, tries to make a ceasefire, as Haaretz reported that the Trump's envoy in Qatar force Netanyahu to sign the deal, to accept the deal.
Right. Stephen Witkoff is his name.
Yeah. What was the importance of this for Donald Trump to start with?
Well, I proceed from the belief that people like to dismiss Trump as just a narcissist. Well, please show me a president that hasn't been, quote, a narcissist. So somebody that wants to be viewed in history as having been a good person, having been an effective person, having been a good leader. Trump, his personality type is he tries to get along with everybody. He wants to be liked, and he's not going to take actions necessarily that will put him in a light that will make him unlikable. So he wants to have a relationship with the Saudis, with the Gulf Arabs, the Emiratis, the Omanis, the Kuwaitis. Also, he's very strongly in favor of Israel. He has, I think, he genuinely wants to conclude this Abraham agreement, or the Abraham Accord, to secure a peace between Israel and the Arabs, the Muslim states, and in doing so, also create a Palestinian state. I know a lot of people believe that because he got, reportedly Miriam Adelson, the widow of Sheldon Adelson, wealthy billionaire, Jewish guy out of Las Vegas, maybe promised him $100 million. Then I heard that she only delivered $50 million, but it's still $50 million. That Trump was going to do everything that basically be at her beck and call. If we've learned anything about Donald Trump over the last, not just 8 years, the last 20 years, nobody owns him. He still does his own thing. And, that was exemplified here when he sent Stephen Witkoff, who on paper is an Orthodox Jew, on paper is like a diehard supporter of Israel. But he showed up and, as they said, Netanyahu said, "Oh, you can't meet with you Friday because it's a Sabbath." He's praying. Right. And Witkoff basically said, I don't give a damn. We're going to meet, and they met. And, he apparently laid it out to Bibi, do this or else. So, everyone's trying to, put their own little spin on it. But the reality was Trump's, whatever Witkoff said to Netanyahu, was sufficient to move Netanyahu to accept an agreement that had already been on the table for the last 12 months. And he finally came around to it. I don't see Trump. I see Trump trying to cobble together a deal. And in cobbling and putting that deal together, he doesn't make saving Israel a priority, or is catering to this settler, ultra religious group of crazies, the Ben Gavirs and the Smotriches. So it's, he's going to carve out a deal, I believe, and it may or may not necessarily favor Israel. Now, we've heard Michael Waltz, I think. I don't know if you've played the tape yet, but, basically they said, well, yeah, if Hamas doesn't live up to this agreement, Israel will go back in. Well, Hamas is going to live up to the agreement, but Israel's going to look for an excuse to say that they haven't so that they can go back on the attack. Again, I can't emphasize enough. They want to eliminate the Palestinians from Gaza. They don't want them to stay. They must go. And that, so that issue is going to continue to haunt Trump through his presidency, and we'll see if he's able to, maybe bring an end to it. I think he could bring an end to it, but it would require telling Netanyahu and telling the religious Zionists, no, the Palestinians stay, and the Palestinians are going to have land, and they're going to have a country to call their own.
There are many people, Larry, who are supporting Palestinians but are not happy with the ceasefire. They're saying that Israel is getting prepared to attack even harder in the future. That's why they're not happy with the situation. But after all, Larry, we know that the situation in Gaza was so unbelievable, was so dire. That's why this ceasefire would help them. And we saw the trucks going to Gaza helping people.
How could Israel attack harder? They can't. We've already seen what Israel can do. They're great at killing unarmed civilians and destroying infrastructure because they're not faced with any kind of air defense system at all. In spite of that, in particular over this last week, I think one of the things that provided an impetus for concluding this agreement, the Israelis started suffering, pretty serious casualties with killed and wounded. Over a 3-day period, there were like 10 Israeli soldiers killed, which was, people say, well, that's not a lot, in light of the Israelis killing 50 to 100 Palestinians a day. But for Israel, it is a lot. And the Israelis place no value on Palestinian lives, but they place enormous value on Israeli lives, because they are a relatively small country. And I've used the analogy just to help people try to understand this. If you take a major city like New York City with 8-9 million people, and in any given year, if you may have 4 or 5 police killed on the job. Well, here in a year, Israel's the size of New York City essentially, and it's had close to 800 people killed. And when you factor in the number, from October 7th, coupled with the war since, a lot have killed, a lot wounded, much more wounded. And then the suicide rate among Israeli soldiers is going up. So it's taking a toll. This is not Israel's pursuit of genocide is not cost-free. It comes with a terrible price. And the soldiers on the front line that have something of a conscience are the ones who are going to be haunted by the images of the children that they've killed and the women that they've killed. There's no honor in that. None whatsoever. And so those emotional problems will continue to haunt the Israelis if they renew combat operations.
Well, apparently the impetus behind this negotiation is Donald Trump, who has put both sides on notice that that when he becomes president, this conflict needs to be over. Hamas appears ready to agree. And in many ways, this would be a victory for Hamas, even though they would not have achieved, the statehood that they were looking for when this began on October 7th. They will have emerged undefeated. It'll be tragic. I mean, the cost paid by the Palestinians and the Gazans in particular is horrendous. And the reconstruction is a nightmare. But the death and destruction will end, humanitarian aid will flow in, and Gaza will remain Gaza. the talk of depopulating Gaza, evicting all Palestinians from Gaza, turning Gaza into part of Greater Israel, is over. Trump has put tremendous pressure on Netanyahu personally. The problem for Netanyahu right now is internally in Israel. His far right coalition, which appears to be built around Ben Gvir, I think his Minister of Interior, are rejecting this and are saying that they will withdraw from the government and collapse the government if Netanyahu was to proceed. But I don't think Netanyahu has an option. I think actually Netanyahu, if he could bring an end to this conflict and bring the hostages home, might be able to cob together an alternative coalition capable of governing that would disenfranchise the far right. But in any event, let's just be straight up clear about this. This is happening because of Donald Trump. And let this be a lesson to everybody who condemned Trump for, promoting or for creating what they called the most pro-Israeli cabinet in the history of the United States. It might as well have been Israel, they said. Well, I think Donald Trump just showed the lie to that. That at the end of the day, Donald Trump puts America first. And right now he's saying that this conflict between Israel and Gaza is not good for America. It's damaging America around the world. And it has to come to an end. The genocide must stop. And he's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu, something that I don't think anybody expected when the election, when the election results came in.
We know that Netanyahu is just experiencing some sort of internal pressure from Ben Gvir and Smotrich. Are they going to resign, in your opinion?
I hope so. I'd love to see this government collapse, and I'd love to see them disenfranchised politically so that they were unable to influence Israeli politics. They are an extreme minority. They came into politics because Netanyahu desperately needed to create a governing coalition, so he brought them in. But like I said, I think to bring an end to this conflict, Netanyahu should be able to cobble together an alternative coalition. That doesn't include Ben Gvir and these other fanatic right-wing genocide supporters. I mean, Gaza is the key to the current situation. But remember, Hezbollah and Israel were hooking and jabbing even before October 7th because Israel's continued occupation of the Shebaa farms, which Lebanon views as Lebanese territory. And now Israel continues to occupy southern Lebanon. So even if Gaza is resolved, Lebanon will not be resolved until which time Israel withdraws from southern Lebanon. Now, Israel is withdrawn from Israel occupied southern Lebanon because of Hezbollah's role in creating a northern front to assist Gaza. And again, if you solve the Gaza problem, everything else seems to fall in line. First of all, if you solve the Gaza problem, the Houthi will stop firing their missiles. That's been their condition all along.
Israel is just expanding. This mindset of colonialism is just continuing in the head of these people in Israel. Is that possible by the end of Trump's presidency? By the end of his term, he can force them to define their borders?
Of course he can. Let's just clear the air here. Israel's nothing without the United States. Israel is nothing without the United States. Israel can do nothing without the United States. And it's rare that you get an American president willing to stand up to Israel. Donald Trump may have turned out to have fooled us all, taking $100 million from Edelman's widow and bringing in all the Zionists and surrounding himself with Zionists. But at the end of the day, as I've said repeatedly, none of those people matter. Marco Rubio doesn't matter. Mike Huckabee doesn't matter. Elise Stefanik doesn't matter. None of these people matter. The only person that matters is Donald Trump. And for the next 4 years, Donald Trump's going to do what Donald Trump wants to do. He has the mandate, and he has in his mind figured out Washington, D.C., how to make things work. People can mock him all they want, and he will tell Israel what the hell he wants Israel to do, and Israel's going to do it. make fun of Donald Trump at your own risk. I mean, there are places where he can't push. I don't think he's going to get very far pushing against Vladimir Putin in Russia because he doesn't have the kind of leverage. But he can bring an end to that conflict by telling NATO to pound sand, which he's going to do. I mean, his nominee for Secretary of Defense today straight up said, Ukraine's not our priority. So, why does NATO exist? Again, my point is this: we have a president now who understands what power is and will use that power. And he's operating against people who are unaccustomed to this kind of brutal application of American power. And when I mean brutal, I don't mean violent. I'm just saying just straight in your face. Straight in your face, no diplomacy. This is just straight up in your face. You're going to do this. Imagine the conversations that are being held with Benjamin Netanyahu right now. This isn't Tony Blinken coming in and saying, I'm a Zionist and I will do this. This isn't, anybody from the Biden administration coming in and giving Netanyahu, the opportunity to stand up and puff up. These guys come in there, as soon as Netanyahu puffs up, a pin hits it, boom. And they're just straight up with it. We will crush you. We will destroy you. We will take you down. Okay, you will do what we tell you to do. That's a new sheriff in town. So, again, will it work? We'll see. What happens when somebody calls Trump's bluff? I'm always worried about such forceful, in-your-face thing, because if they call your bluff, you better kick their ass right now. I mean, if I'm going to be the neighborhood bully, and I go around and the first person that steps up to me, I have to take him down hard, and then turn to everybody else and say, you want a piece of this? To let everybody know what the consequences are. That's a dangerous posture. I'm not in favor of it. I'm just saying that Donald Trump may have fooled us all. Everybody who looked at his cabinet and said, man, this is about making greater Israel and all this. No, Donald Trump is about making America great again. And the Middle East is a huge drag on that aspiration. And so he's out to resolve this issue so that America can disengage instead of doubling down. It's a failed administration trying to fix failed policy. They could have had this ceasefire a long time ago if Biden had acted like Donald Trump. If Biden had sat down with the Israelis and said, not just no, but hell no. You want bombs? You ain't getting bombs. You want spare parts? You're not getting spare parts. We're not doing this. We're not doing any of this. Stop it right now, or else I unplug everything. You'll collapse before I collapse. That's a guarantee. I will take you down. That's all you have to say to him. I will take you down. When was the last time Joe Biden tweeted out Jeffrey Sachs' condemnations of Israel? When did Joe Biden do that? Donald Trump just did it. That's about as in your face as it gets. It's sort of indicative of what's going on behind the scenes. So yeah, no, there's only one sheriff right now. He ain't wearing the badge, but everybody knows that there's 2 holes in his coat pocket, and on January 20th, the badge slides right in.